I'd like to call us to order. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Adjustment for the City of Morganton. Your Board of Adjustment is pleased that there's so much civic interest tonight. We normally don't have this level of interest in our meetings. Thank you for being here. We genuinely mean that. We are going to hear one case this evening, an application for a use permit by Cellco Partnership doing business as Verizon Wireless for the construction of a telecommunications tower and related appurtenances. Before we begin, it is important for everyone to understand some important facts relating to this meeting tonight. This Board of Adjustment meeting is known as a quasi-judicial proceeding, which means it functions like a court proceeding in which one's individual's rights are being determined. Testimony will be limited to only those issues concerning whether the use permit should be granted under the Morganton zoning ordinance. The legal purpose of this quasi-judicial hearing is not to gather public opinions and suggestions as to the policy to be applied. The policy is already set forth in the Morganton City Ordinance. The board tonight making this decision must apply those existing policies to a specific application. The purpose of the evidentiary hearing tonight is to gather legally sufficient factual evidence to apply those standards to the application. Are there any board members here tonight who feel they cannot sit as an impartial decision maker in today's proceedings? If so, let it be known right now. Hearing none, in the opinion of the chair, there are no conflicts tonight for this Board of Adjustment. The order of business for this hearing will be as follows. Firstly, there will be an approval of last meeting's minutes. Secondly, we will discuss as a board whether or not there are any matters of old business we need to attend to. Thirdly, we will launch into a presentation of evidence with regard to the application I've already described tonight. First, the senior planner from the Morganton Development and Design Department will provide an overview of the application. Board members will be in turn able to ask any questions they deem appropriate. Then we will hear from the applicant itself, who will present evidence in support of the request and answer any questions from the board about the evidence. I am aware that, having seen a number of you sign up to speak, that you in the audience have requested an opportunity to be heard tonight. You will have that opportunity. The board's request is simple, that you limit your remarks to the issues and evidence involving the applicant's compliance with the zoning ordinance. Again, this board is not a policy-making body. Moreover, if another speaker ahead of you has already presented your viewpoint or position, for the sake of efficiency, and so we're not here till midnight, the board would appreciate you not being repetitious. All persons who speak and participate tonight will be placed under oath. Witnesses may also choose, of course, to affirm. If you want the board to see written evidence, such as reports, maps, or exhibits, the witness who is familiar with the evidence should ask that it be introduced during or at the end of your presentation. In addition, in order for the testimony to be considered as evidence and our use as the board in its decision, it can only be given by persons in attendance at the meeting tonight. Otherwise, consistent with a judicial process, it will be considered as hearsay. At this time, I would ask anyone who is prepared to give remarks tonight and be a speaker to please rise and prepare to be sworn. Madam Clerk, if you'll please provide the oath. Please raise your right hand for me. Do you swear or affirm that the presentation you give tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated. I now open the hearing regarding the application. But before we do that, I would ask the board whether or not there is a motion with regard to the approval of last meeting's minutes.
Move to approve.
Motion's been made to approve last meeting's minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second has been made. Any discussion regarding last meeting's minutes? Hearing none, all in favor of the minutes standing as written, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Hearing none, motion carries. The meetings from last time are passed. With regard to old business, there is none on the agenda, but I wanted to inquire of the board whether or not anyone had an issue of old business you wanted to bring up. In the opinion of the chair, there are none, and therefore we will proceed to the new business tonight, which is the application. At this time, I would ask our senior planner to please rise and approach the podium for a presentation to the board. Please, sir, if you'll state your full name, your position, and your street address.
Sure. Jesse James, Senior Planner, City of Morganton, 501 Alexander Avenue. Okay. I did have some slides prepared for the television, but what I'll be doing is reading off the staff report. The slides are on the laptop there at the podium there. In brief, this is an application by Cello Partnership DBA, Verizon Wireless. It's a request for approval of a zoning permit for a 199-foot telecommunication monopine tower. The current zoning jurisdiction or designation out in that 145 Boss Road parcel identified as PIN 1794328709 is LID, which is considered light intensity district. The current use of that parcel is fairgrounds and event space. The proposed accessory use would be the telecommunication tower that would be leased by Burke County Fair Incorporated, who is the owner of the subject property. There are several points to consider, which are within the City of Morganton's zoning ordinance. One, which is the main point as far as zoning is considered, is telecommunication towers are permitted as an accessory use in the LID zoning district. They are not permitted in the River Overlay District. However, this exact site would be outside of the River Overlay District boundaries. Section 3.4.7H5 states that the Board of Adjustment shall consider and issue, if appropriate, permits for the construction, erection, location, and relocation of telecommunication towers in all cases where the administrator is without authority to issue the permit. This section also provides required considerations and findings by the Board of Adjustment. 3.4.7H4 B and C collectively states that the administrator may issue a permit for telecommunication towers in the EID district only for alternative tower structures under 100 feet in height. Therefore, the determination of the approval would go to the Board of Adjustment. Section 3.4.7H6, which is attached to your packets, provides specific requirements that shall be considered for the issuance of all telecommunication towers. After review of the application is found to be in compliance with provisions of 3.4.7H for sufficiency. The plan does, however, in regards to fencing, is not compliant with section 4.4.9.3F, which reads barbed wire on top of chain link fences is permitted in rear yard fences not visible from a street in the EID district only, which is industrial district. Staff recommends removal of the barbed wire from the proposed plans. Otherwise, the Board of Adjustment must consider the application and make findings as required in section 3.4.7H5. Chairman, if you would allow, I do have some maps to show to the public here that is on.
Please.
Thank you. As we've already gone over, the proposed location is 145 Boss Road. Wanted to make it clear what the state requirements are, and then furthermore, what the city requires for public notice. The state requires that notice to be mailed 10 days prior to a hearing, but not more than 25 days prior to properties abutting the subject property. The city did mail those June 27th, which meets the state requirements. Sign is similar, the 10 to 25 day period that was posted on June 27th. Additionally, the state does not require legal ads to be placed in circulation. However, our department decided it would be more transparent to place that legal ad in the Morganton News Herald on June 27th. As you'll see on the screen, this is the site plan provided by the applicant. As you see there's a lot of detail on there, but I got it as big as I could. But the area around the red circle is the proposed site of the telecommunication tower, the monopine tower. When you follow into the site on the paved road, it's there on the right outside of the river overlay district, which is in that hatched mark there. This is a rendering of the elevation plan provided by the applicant showing the tower, the monopine area at the top, and the fencing below. As I alluded to before, it's very important that everyone know that telecommunication towers are a permitted use under the LID zoning designation, not inside the river district overlay, as you can see in the overlay exceptions. However, it is a requirement in the ordinance for the Board of Adjustment to make the approval based off of conditions within the ordinance. This is a zoning map of the area. The star has a red arrow pointing more towards the area where the tower is proposed. It is in the LID zoning designation, which is most of the surrounding area, with a neighborhood conservation overlay to the north, MID and EID to the south, with some HID at the bottom. But it is LID zoning. again, the city ordinance requires the Board of Adjustment shall consider and issue, if appropriate, permits for construction, erection, location, relocation of telecommunication towers in all cases where the administrator without authority to issue the permit. Based upon the information and record before the Board of Adjustment, the board shall issue the permit if the board finds the application is complete, the proposed tower will meet all of the requirements of paragraph 6, and the issuance of the permit will help accomplish the policies set forth in paragraph 2, which states, "It is the policy of the City of Morganton that the visual impact of telecommunication towers and/or antennas should be minimized through the use, where feasible, of alternative tower structures. If alternative tower structures are not available, it is technically or economically not feasible to use an alternative tower structure, then the joint or multiple use of single tower in less objectionable locations may, by different communication companies, sometimes called co-location, should be and is encouraged, so as to minimize the need to construct new towers and to minimize the overall number of towers throughout the city." This section is intended to implement that policy. As I briefly showed before, Section 4.4.7 it goes into our City of Morganton screening standards, in which does not allow barbed wire fences anywhere other than the EID district. So that is something to be noted on possible conditions, that the plan does, however, have the barbed wire on the top of the screening fence, which is not allowed under our zoning ordinance. Excuse me. And here's a elevation rendering of the plan with the proposed barbed wire. And that is all, and I will turn to the board for questions about the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. James. At this time, I would ask Board Member Shelor if you have any questions for the senior planner. Board Member Britton.
I just got a question on the location. When we see it on the screen, it had an arrow pointing more towards the Boss Road. The map that we had it up there in that B, up there behind the property line. Is it, just clarify for
That
me
was
where it's
just-
gonna go?
The one that you had in your packet was more or less the property in general, but their specific site plan that's in their application packet shows the exact site with the, as you can see on the screen, the 100 by 100 area outside of the River District overlay.
So it's gonna be over closer to Boss Road than what?
Yes, sir.
Than it is up here.
Yes, sir.
Could you summarize what was just stated?
Please, sir. No, you
They couldn't hear.
couldn't hear? Okay. Will you please repeat that into the microphone, please?
I was just asking a question. The paperwork we got showed it kindly at the back of the fairground property up there in a V. Then we showed on the screen, it had an arrow going over there like it was closer to the Boss Road than the plan that I had. And that's what I was asking, verify where it's actually going. And it's, I see it's going over closer to the Boss Road.
And to repeat, that's that map was a zoning designation map. The exact location was shown in the prior slide from the applicant that shows its exact location with the scale and its exact location within the parcel property. The map the board member is referring to is the zoning map with the location on the parcel.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Board Member Lindsay, sir, if you have any questions for the city.
Thank you,
senior
Mr.
planner.
Chairman. I do have some questions. Thank you very much for the good work that you've done on this. It's a relatively new employment of the employee of the City of Morganton. I wanted to clarify for myself and perhaps for other people about why this is even before the Board of Adjustment, because my understanding is that we're receiving this only because you're not authorized to approve unilaterally new cell towers in any zoning districts other than exclusive industrial districts. In other words, you're not authorized to approve new cell towers in HID, high-intensity districts, or MID, medium-intensity districts, and most particularly, you're not authorized to approve them unilaterally in low-intensity districts next to exclusively residential areas, such as Morganton is being asked to authorize in the present case with Burke County Fairgrounds next to Camelot, which is exclusively residential. Am I completely correct in understanding that if Verizon had come to you and said, we would like to have this in an EID district, that you could have authorized it without, coming, to this, or you had, when the client came to you, you had to bring it to us. But if it had been in an EID, you could have approved it without that. And one thing that you have not yet shown us is a map that has HID and medium-intensity districts, and even more particularly, other locations in LID districts, which the person which Verizon coming to you could have said, well, we can put a tower there. So I don't see this issue that's before us as a simple issue of co-location. I see it as an issue which goes beyond co-location to the issue of whether or not they have picked an appropriate spot.
Mr. Lindsay, let me have the senior planner answer the question that you've asked him with regard to his reasoning for not dealing with the application himself.
Sure. Thanks for the question. Yes, you had, I think I got most of that. The staff is only allowed to approve plans in the EID district amongst other related tower issues. But as far as a new tower and within a permitted district up to 100 feet that is consistent with the surrounding communities and the EID, but anything outside of the EID district would go to the Board of Adjustment for approval. The city has given the Board of Adjustment that power for approval.
Well, I guess what I'm saying, I have not seen in the application anything which says that they could not find an appropriate location in an EID district that would serve, or in HID district that would serve, or an MID district that would serve, and more particularly in some other LID districts that would not be right up against a residential area. I have not seen anything to that effect in their application. So I'm prepared to hear that, but I haven't seen it yet in the application.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll leave that to the applicant to prove those questions with the requirements.
Mr. Lindsay, any other questions for the senior planner?
Yes, my understanding is also that the Morganton Planning Commission and the City Council, they've not been asked to do any rezonings in conjunction with this. There's nothing in prospect that would change the zoning of the fairgrounds so that this would not be before this group.
No,
You don't
sir.
have any rezoning proposals before you at this point?
We have not in the past, or have not had any proposals for any rezonings that would have anything to consider with this case.
Okay. I have other questions, but they'll be later. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Lindsay, you still have time. You can ask them now.
That's enough for right now. Thank you very much,
All
Mr.
right.
Chairman.
Board Member Lowe.
I have nothing at this time.
Mr. James, with regard to your review of the application from Verizon Wireless, are applicants who look to site a tower in the Morganton city limits required pursuant to the zoning ordinance to identify other appropriate locations or more appropriate locations?
There is a section on page 3-44, which is paragraph A, or it's under paragraph 5, which does list a section that starts, "In considering the application and for the purpose of establishing factual basis for its findings, the board may require the applicant to provide evidence in support of the application, including, among other things," it does, A, copies of letters sent to owners of all existing towers within 1 mile radius of the proposed site, requesting Tower 2 or 1 Tower 2 existing planned tower users. 3, whether the proposed antenna cannot accommodate the existing tower. And it goes more in depth with other apparatuses that aren't necessarily in regards to a tower. There is within the application, which was provided by the applicant, a section where they go over I won't go over all of this, but they have provided their statement labeled Statement of Compliance with the City of Morganton Zoning Ordinance, where they do go over the findings from this section. And it would take me a second to find that answer to your question.
Well, let me ask you this, Mr. James, while you're looking for that. Did you have an opportunity to review this application?
Yes, sir.
And in the course of reviewing this application, did you review the application against all the criteria that are set forth in the Morganton City zoning ordinance?
Yes, sir.
And as you reviewed the application with regard to the criteria set forth in the Morganton City ordinance, did you come to a conclusion with regard to whether or not the application met all the criteria of the Morganton City ordinance?
It appears the requirements were met, other than the screening standard that I alluded to before on the barbed wire fencing. The staff does not make recommendations for approval. However, the review of the application shows that the requirements were met according to their plan set and the answers to the questions, along with maps of locations and of alternative towers.
As you know, one of the key requirements for our board tonight under the zoning ordinance is for the Board of Adjustment to determine as a threshold matter that the application is in fact complete. Did you reach an opinion on whether or not the application was complete, barring the fencing issue with regard to the barbed wire?
Yes, sir. The application appears to be complete under the staff's review.
Ms. James, I don't have any other questions. We'll go back through another round. Ms. Sheeler, do you have any questions? Mr. Brattain, any additional questions?
No.
Mr. Lindsay?
I'm not sure that I agree with you, as the city's administrator on this particular issue.
I'd ask the members to withhold your opinions with regard to agreeing or not agreeing at this point. We'll have an opportunity to deliberate in a few moments.
Well,
after
for
we've
one,
heard all the evidence.
when you look at page 344, it says that one of the things that we are supposed to consider is the visual impact on the surrounding area, especially naturally scenic areas or historic districts. And so until there's a finding by this group that they are satisfied that this does not have impermissible visual impact on the surrounding area, then I would say that all of the conditions that Morganton has established for the cell tower to be there have not been satisfied.
Mr.
Am I
Lindsay?
incorrect?
Well, in which section?
This is on page 344 if you're on ordinance.
Hold on a second. Let me just ask the audience.
We're not a rubber stamp,
Just-
that's all I
just-
was
just
saying.
Hold on, Mr.
Okay.
Let me ask just for purposes of, I realize that there's a lot of opinions in the room tonight, but I would ask you to avoid any sort of display of agreeing or disagreeing one way or the other. Let's just be respectful of one another as much as we can. Mr. Lindsay, you have asked the question to Mr. James.
Yes, so I believe the section that Mr. Lindsay is referring to is under paragraph 5, in which it does state, in making its determination as to whether the permit should be issued allowing the construction of a telecommunication tower in the MID or HID zoning districts, the board shall, among other things, consider and make appropriate findings regarding the following, in which one of those is the visual impact on surrounding areas, especially naturally scenic areas or historic districts. Now, I would like to state that the staff did not create this ordinance. It is what we are given to approve by. And I can't use that section because this property is zoned LID. It is not MID or HID in nature. So that reference you are speaking to on section 3.44 is not one of the criteria in order to put before you for the Board of Adjustment.
Mr. Lindsay, additional questions?
I need to understand this. What you're saying is that the ordinance requires more consideration for the visual impact on the surrounding area for HID and MID than it does for LID, and therefore we can't consider that when we discuss LID?
Not according to the ordinance.
I'm not certain that would have been the intent of council, but thank you very much.
Any other questions, Mr. Lindsay?
That's sufficient for now. Thank you very much.
Mr. Lowe?
I have no questions.
All right. Mr. James, thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, I would ask the applicant to please come up and identify yourself, your full name, and your title and your purpose for being here, and please proceed.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Josh Rotenstrike. I'm from Greensboro, North Carolina. My address is 1801 Colonial Avenue. I'm here on behalf of Baker Donaldson and Verizon Wireless. And the purposes of our attending this hearing tonight is to request zoning permit to construct a monopole cell phone tower. Before I begin, members of the board, I'd like to say what an honor it is to speak here. My grandfather was Dr. Alfred Hamer. I know he participated in city council for years and years, and it is tremendous for me to be here tonight to speak in front of this board. I've been in this room many times with him, showing me around, and he passed in February, as y'all may know, and just an honor for me to be here.
Well, welcome back to Morganton, and please come often.
Thank you. As you've heard, this is a request for a construction of a 190-foot, 5-foot monopine wireless telecommunications tower. This will additionally have a 4-foot lightning rod on top of that, making a total of 199 feet. A couple things I'd like to address before I continue any further. There is one correction I'd like to point out. If you go to tab 4 in the packet you've been given, which is the network objective statement, the first paragraph, there's a misleading statement that says the Bose Road area is currently served by an existing Verizon Wireless Bose Road site. That's actually what we're here applying for today. The truth is, and what was supposed to be in that, is that the nearest site is downtown Morganton site, which was approved and previously constructed, which is northeast of this site outside of the mile threshold. So I just wanted to first bring that to your attention, that that was a mistake in the network objective statement. To continue going forward, this site will be located at the 145 Bose Road Morganton site. And we are proposing and presenting to the board that we have met all standards set forth in the ordinance as Morganton has already stated, and respectfully request the proposed tower be approved. As previously stated, this tower, the area where the tower will be constructed is currently zoned LID, and therefore all applicable portions of this application met the criteria for LID zoning. The proposed facility will be constructed and operated in accordance with all FCC and FAA requirements and guidelines, which were mandated under Section 6 of the, under Portion 6 of the Section 3.4.7. Additionally, the proposed tower and facility will be appropriately secured as previously stated. We will amend our application to the condition presented with no barbed wire. It is accurate that this application was originally proposed with barbed wire on top of the 8-foot-high locked gate fence. However, that barbed wire will be removed as a condition set by the board if this application is approved. Additionally, in order to camouflage the presented tower, the pole of the tower will be painted brown to best resemble a pine tree. And additionally, it'll be created as a monopine tower, looking as much like a tree as one could possibly ask of a cell phone tower. The adjacent properties to the north do have a residential use, and therefore we did prepare a C1, which was the site survey and zoning drawings prepared by our tower engineer. And if you go to C1 under Exhibit 5, which I believe was the map that was previously put on by staff. Again, you will see that the tower will meet all required setbacks for the property line, which is that for each foot of the tower, it is required to be that distance back from the most nearest residential line. Therefore, the setback to the property line will be 199 feet, which is the height of the tower. This tower will not have any lights on it, as it is below the threshold for the FAA guidelines. And additionally, there will be vegetation in the form of inkberry holly will be installed around the perimeter of the equipment to screen the area and again make it less visually obtrusive. I present to the board that we have met all the requirements as established by the Morganton Ordinance and do request approval for this tower. I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you. Ms. Sheeler, any questions? Thank you. Mr. Britton?
No.
Mr. Lindsay, any questions for the applicant?
I would be appreciative if you would discuss your engineer's letter that was provided in regard to this. Because as I understand that, he's saying basically that the city's ordinance is completely outdated when it comes to asking the question about co-location. In fact, he's saying that that notwithstanding the fact, if I'm understanding it correctly, he's saying that notwithstanding the co-location provisions of the ordinance, that the technology has changed so much that, you know, that is obsolete. And basically that tells me that if the city of Morganton wishes to regulate the proliferation of cell towers, it's going to need a new and different ordinance. And I'd like to, you know, if you would read the letter aloud to us, so unless you can project it on the screen.
I can. Can we project it? I'm happy to read it as well. And I would like to say prior to that and to explain to everyone who's listening, there's two main purposes for these cell phone towers. One, as you would imagine, is to provide coverage in the general area of the tower. There's nowhere, you know, there's nothing in the area. You put a tower up, you get some coverage. The next thing is not just to provide the coverage, but to provide capacity offload for surrounding towers. And that's based on a per person in the area that needs cell phone service, emergency contact services, as well as data, which is internet and those things that now are on every cell phone device and some laptops that have wireless capabilities. So the co-location portion of this, one, a co-location check was performed and there were no towers in the nearby area that would satisfy the need for the lack of capacity that the surrounding towers do provide. So that was the first thing. I believe the part you're referring to does go into the 4G LTE technology and the things that he mentions in the letter, which are the new things out here on cell phones and wireless computers that do require data usage that, again, when you have several hundreds or thousands of people using off of one tower, it requires more capacity offload, and therefore a tower in a closer by area or vicinity is therefore required. I'm happy can we project this? Is that a possibility?
Paragraph 3 and 4.
Hold one second.
Do you have a digital
I
file
don't
for it?
have, I just have the paper copy.
I didn't have that prepared in the presentation, however, it is
I-
included in your,
I feel like I summarized, but I'm happy to read it aloud. I don't know if that would be in the best interest of time or putting everyone to sleep.
Let me ask the question of the board. The board members want to have the letter written aloud. I believe it's been provided to each member of the board.
We could also move it into evidence if that makes it for the purpose of the record.
Well, let's allow Mr. Lindsay, who's asking the question, to proceed with regard to the document, and you can make a request as you see fit.
Well, he said, his last paragraph, you can, if you would interpret this for me, says the only way to address the demand is with more sites closer together and in many cases lower than legacy cell sites. No reasonable combination of locations, techniques, or technologies will obviate the need for or mitigate the height or visual impact of the proposed tower. And so, if I read that letter, you know, as I did, in particular, the last three paragraphs of the letter, he's saying that the whole issue of co-location is moot. And if the only regulation that Morganton has at this point regarding LID, location of cell towers, is the old coverage location where you could co-locate, he's saying co-location is really not an option.
My understanding, and again, if you start at the last paragraph of what he's saying, is in the above described scenario, coverage is not the issue, but rather the demand being placed on the network. And because of that, co-location is not the problem in this scenario. Co-location in every county I've presented in is always the first thing we look for because, well, quite frankly, it's cheaper than building a new tower to co-locate. There's no interest in putting a tower up if we can be on another tower. However, in this particular case, because of the population density and the need for additional, not coverage, but additional capacity on the surrounding towers, this offloads that from the towers that are already existing. So again, adding the equipment onto a already existing tower or co-locating would not serve that same purpose, which was my reading of that last paragraph. And I do apologize to the board. My engineer is not here to testify, and
Yes, I would have liked for him to be here.
I completely understand, and if we need to postpone, I'm happy to do so and have him here. Unfortunately, he was not able to make it tonight, but we did anticipate or plan on him being here.
I'd like to hear what he would have to say about the number of towers that are going to be needed in the future and where they can be located. I also have a question, if I may, though. The city of Morganton, if I am correct, and you correct me if I'm wrong, the city of Morganton operates an identical tower to the one, or one very close to the one you proposed to put up. It owns and operates the tower on Steeple, what's the name, the Steeple? Steeple Heights? Am I correct? You own and
The city of Morganton, I have no way of knowing that. If the city of Morganton owns and operates a tower,
my understanding is that the city of Morganton
The witness wouldn't be able to answer that
okay, if he
question.
can't answer the question, I'd like to raise that question as to whether or not the city of Morganton owns an identical tower which people here in this audience and elsewhere in Morganton to go and look at and see whether or not it meets their aesthetic needs. So,
Once the applicant is finished with any questions,
Thank you very
then
much, yeah.
we'll have the senior planner come back and you can ask him that question. Do you have any other questions for the applicant, Mr. Lindsay?
I'd like to reserve the right to come back and have, additional questions if the need arises.
and on that note, for what it's worth, I can say that there is a very similar tower you may have seen on the way to Charlotte on I-85. I mean, it's what you're thinking of. It's a monopine looking cell phone tower. It looks like as much like a tree as you could make a cell phone tower. I mean, I'm not going to represent to the board, you can't tell the difference, but it looks as much like a tree as you can make a cell phone tower.
Thank you.
Let me ask, how much capacity can you put on a tower and how much can you add?
These towers will have
Changing over
The-
time?
These towers will have spaces for 4 additional carriers to join. Verizon will have one box unit for their Verizon services, and if you had another applicant, T-Mobile or another cell phone provider come in here and make the same motion for the same area, it could be denied based on co-location because now our tower exists and provides additional locations for other carriers to join.
Based on that response, let me ask a follow-up. if I'm reading the application correctly, your office guarantees that one co-location spot would be there. It doesn't guarantee that four co-location spots would be there. Are you amending your application so that it could take four instead of just one?
I believe the application met the ordinance requirement, and if the ordinance requirement was one, the tower is capable of holding four. It would have been whatever the ordinance requirement is. If it's just one, that's been how the application would have been written.
Would it be your interpretation that that's something the board could say, that they wanted you to have the ability to put four on there instead of just one?
I
Or
don't
can it be
kn-
modified subsequently?
I would have to look into that and see. I don't have that answer at this time.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Lindsay, do you have any other questions for the applicant?
Not right now, thank you.
Mr. Lowe?
No.
All right, thank you. Sir, I'm interested in, with regard to the tower itself, in reviewing the zoning ordinance. I believe you testified to the fact, and your application reveals that there would be an 8-foot fence. There is also language in our zoning ordinance that requires anti-climbing devices shall be installed on all towers. And I didn't see that described in your application. Can you give testimony tonight with regard to how you're going to comply with the zoning ordinance with regard to anti-climbing devices on the tower?
Yes, sir. What I can tell you is that the application did provide for anti-climbing devices which were in the shape of barbed wire. However, with that condition and be the removal, I suppose there would be an additional or an additional condition set forth of how we would do that. I would have to talk to the engineers in the construction group of how they do that, but I do know there are other options for anti-climbing devices other than barbed wire.
Are you prepared tonight to describe to the board with an anti-climbing device that would be appropriate for us to consider?
I can be, if you give me a few moments. I have to step out and make a phone call.
All right, we'll stand down a moment.
Jesse, can you speak to the,
He needs to do that under a formal process.
like,
Be careful that we're doing this formal.
I know.
Well, we need to keep an open mind.
I think we have, our finance department that he's talking about on the tower. Is that the?
And then less noticeable if it's up higher than it was down there which one it is. Been any less noticeable up higher?
Well, then if you look at the lay of the land, this is the high spot and this is low, but
With the cell tower there.
It must have been screened a little bit worse, a little bit more, because I figured what I thought was gonna go up here.
well, there's also a lot of, there's just as many homes there.
Madam Clerk, if you'll please go retrieve our applicant and tell him we need to move on.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a specific. You have the power to set conditions.
We're back in session, and I would ask the applicant if you are aware of any devices that can be attached to the tower, and if not, would you be prepared to present that as a condition if the board was to choose to set that as a condition for the tower?
Absolutely. So we have a contractor who is calling us back, but the one thing that we do know is there is a vinyl mesh lining that is wrapped around the fence, which prohibits from climbing. Again, the barbed wire, which we know that are other ordinances that exclude, and then I'll have other options to present momentarily. The one that we knew of and have used in the past is the mesh lining that surrounds the chain link fence, which makes it unable to be climbed up.
Let me turn your attention to the additional user issue that you got in a back and forth discussion with Mr. Lindsay about. As part of that provision in the ordinance, there is also a requirement that an additional equipment building be provided with regard to a second user. I didn't see the plan to build a second building in your application, and so I wanted to ask if that was something that Verizon Wireless was prepared to do. That's with regard to section 6H.
I don't believe a second building is required to have a second user on the tower. The building itself goes below the tower, and then the co-locator would be on top of the tower as well.
So my specific question is with regard to the zoning ordinance language that reads, "The site plan shall indicate a location for at least one additional equipment building for use by a second user."
Oh, this is, I'm sorry, 6H?
This is 6H. I didn't see that in your application, and I was, if you could draw my attention that in fact is,
If you go to CA, C2, and C3 under tab 5, I believe. And this is again prepared by our engineer professionals. The tower will be designed to support one additional user, and the site plan includes a location for at least 3 additional equipment buildings by 3 additional users. And this is also, as evidenced by the share use letter signed by Gina Musa as attached as Exhibit 5.
thank you for addressing that issue.
Again, I can bring it up to the board if it.
And I don't have any other questions. Ms. Sheeler? Mr. Bertang?
No.
Mr. Lindsay?
Reserve the right to come back later.
Mr. Lowe?
No.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, will you please hand me the legal pad? At this time, we'll open the session for any public comments, and I'll take them in order of you signing in. Please understand that if you didn't sign in and you still want to speak, we'll hear you tonight. Wes Bunch, if you'll please come up, state your full name, your address, and share your comments with your Board of Adjustment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I greatly appreciate the board members allowing me to speak tonight. Thank you. My name is Wes Bunch, and my wife and I have lived at 110 Woods Way Court for more than 19 years. We love our community and neighbors and the natural scenic environment that it provides. We are the closest resident to the cell tower. This cell tower is 201 feet off my property, and it's about another additional feet to my back porch. I have been informed by city staff that the tower does not have a light, nor does it emit sound. However, it does have a backup generator. Since our neighborhood was without power that exceeded 24 hours during the December 2018 snowstorm, I wonder what noise level would be like at my back porch when the generator is in use. What possible modifications to the tower might occur, such as adding a light or continuous noise in the future? If so, what would the restrictions be to inform residents about this proposal? I greatly appreciate and understand the need for Verizon to provide cell service for our community. I also appreciate the owner of the property working with Verizon to provide this service for our Burke County residents. I'm not against the cell tower. It's just the location of the tower on the fairground's 41 acres of property. Given the proximity of the tower to my house and my neighbors, could consideration be given to moving the said tower to perhaps the south side of the property where many trees border the property? This would blend in better and provide a greater distance from the neighborhood residents. I greatly appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Tracy Ribel, if you'll please state your full name and your physical address, please, ma'am.
Tracy Riebel, 100 Woodsway Lane. Board members, my name is Tracy Riebel. My husband, young daughter, and I own a home at 100 Woodsway Lane and a vacant lot at 201 Boss Road in the Camelot neighborhood just inside the entrance. Camelot subdivision includes approximately 75 homes and parcels with a combined tax value of almost $18 million. I have several concerns about the proposed location of the Verizon cellular tower. First is the decrease in property value. Property values just increased in the city of Morganton, with the last revaluation, and the tax rate did not change. This means we, the property owners, will be paying more in city taxes in the years to come, while the value of the property will be immediately diminished by the location of the proposed tower. According to BusinessWire.com, 94% of people surveyed said cellular tower location would negatively impact their decision to acquire a property and/or the price they would pay. According to the Appraisal Journal, 71% of homes near a cellular tower had experienced a decline in property value. 38% of those homes experienced a 10% or greater decline, and 14% would experience value loss of 11 to 20%. Based on the tax value of the homes in Camelot, this would cause a tax value decrease of between $1.8 and $3.6 million to the city. In a National Institute for Science, Law, and Public Policy survey of 1,000 respondents, 79% said under no circumstances would they ever purchase or rent a property within a few blocks of a cell tower. The Federal Telecommunications Act of 1996 states health concerns are not a valid reason for a municipality to deny zoning for a cell tower or antenna. However, property values, historical areas, and aesthetics do qualify according to the Act. We, as residents of Boss Road and Camelot, would be financially penalized with the construction of this tower without receiving any of the financial benefits in the lease. My next concern is the lack of simply applying common sense to the location. There are another 42 acres to select from other than the point nearest the Camelot neighborhood. This will be a visual abnormality to landscape as we travel past the fairgrounds each day. Perhaps the back left corner near St. Mary's Church Road would make more sense as a good faith compromise. The fake pine tree will blend in more with the surrounding trees located in that corner of the property rather than being an eyesore in the middle of the field. That location would be adjacent to far fewer homes, having a less impact on city valuations. I am sure the proposed location was selected for ease for access, but the back left corner would provide similar access via the property frontage along St. Mary's Church Road. My request is to deny the zoning request, or at a minimum, relocate the proposed tower to the corner nearest the St. Mary's Church Road frontage as a good faith compromise. I thank you for your time and your interest in this request.
Thank you very much. Larry, I can't read your last name. G-L-A, and I can't, yes, sir. If you'll please state your full name for me.
Larry Thomas Glazner.
Thank you, sir. And if you'll please state your residential address.
My address is 103 Camelot Drive.
Thank you, and please
Excuse
proceed.
me, I'm hoarse today. I was under the impression, I was told that regard is given to historic properties in siting towers and such things as that. And I just want to give a brief talk today about the nature of the property. The property is 103 Camelot Drive. It is on the Historic Registry for National Places. The man that lived there was John Alexander Lackey. He built the house. He was born in 1852. He attended Rutherford College and graduated with honors in 1875. He married in 1876. He was sheriff of Burke County for 2 sessions, beginning in 1882. He was closely associated also with the School for the Deaf. He was the treasurer and secretary for the Rutherford College until his death in 1921. Mr. Lackey bought 209 acres in 1893 in the McDowell section of Quaker Meadows. He built a frame house there that's much the size of the house that's there now. He had 8 children at this time, small children. He and his wife wintered with the children, usually in Morganton, I think on Lenore Street, so that the children could go to school there. The house burned on the site at one point when he was away from the home. He started a new home there in 1900. The bricks from the house were made at the river section, the river bottom clay. They were fired near the old council oak. These bricks were brought by mule up to the hill for the house to be built. He seemed to have a fear of fire in that he'd lost this house and I think previously one other to fire. So the house was built of brick, solid brick, and slate. He used as little wood as possible. The house is solid brick. It's 20 inches thick near the ground at certain areas, and then at certain parts it tapers up to 16 inches, which are solid brick. The roof is slate. These things continue today. There's nothing been torn off from the house. The porch posts have been modified. There have been 2 additions. One is a utility room and one is a carport. On the property, as you drive by, the back of the house actually faces Camelot Drive. This was the back of the house, the dependencies, the kitchen, the back porch. There are 4 verandas that cover 4 sides of the house. Excuse me. The front of the house actually faces Highway 181 and the ornate moldings and properties and establishments there, and the front door face that area. The house is significant because it's a rare example, a surviving example of a farmhouse in any place, but especially Burke County, that's built of brick and slate. It was not built in frame. It's a colonial revival style house, and it retains its interior wood, fireplaces, mantles, stairs, etc. There's been really nothing lost from the house. The tower would be in sight of this property. The property is about 600 feet from the side of the proposed tower. And I'm asking the board tonight to please consider the historic significance of this property and give due respect in your decision to where to place this tower.
Thank you very much, sir. This time I would ask for Howie Copenhaver to please rise and come and Please, Mr. Covenhaver, if you'll please introduce yourself and state your residential home address.
I'm Howie Copenhaver. My wife and I live at 108 Woodsway Court, which is next door to the Bunches and very close to where this tower is going to be. If you just scan that, this is a copy of the notice we received in our afternoon mail a week from today. It contains very little information, I think you would agree. It says nothing about the tower being 200 feet tall, humongous. It's a little misleading, unfortunately, in this, most people that I've talked to that received these felt that the tower itself was where that little red dot is. And that little red dot is up next to the buildings, the fairground buildings. It's unfortunate, the timing of all of this, because apparently staff has made the time interval of notification as required. Unfortunately, as you may know, that included the 4th of July. Many people, as we scrambled around to try to figure out what was going on and what our rights might be and so forth and so on, many people were out of town on vacation, that sort of thing, and we, couldn't get to them. I, along with most of the others I've talked to, feel that we're not against a cell tower. We just feel that it shouldn't be placed where it is. The best outcome for all of us, I believe, would be to get with the Verizon people and relocate it into a much better location. If you can picture driving up Boss Road and seeing that thing staring up 200 feet, as you saw in the picture, about 2/3 of the tree is just a post, and then there's this tree sitting on top of it, which is quite amusing looking. I don't think it's as good looking as the one that's up near the First Baptist Church even, but who knows. Like I say, the best outcome for most of us would be to renegotiate the location, and if you decide not to do that tonight, we would like some additional time, a continuance, if you will, so that we can all work together. As you can see, there's a lot of interest in this, so we can all work together and find a better solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for being here tonight. At this time, I would ask, please forgive me if I've mispronounced your first name, Jerome Smith? Thank you, sir. If you'll please come forward and state your full name and your residential address.
My name is Jerome Smith. I live at 104 Woodsway Court, just up the street, you might say, of the proposed tower, within three houses, I believe. I look at a picture that you showed of this tower with the little twitches on it and say, well, it'll just look like a tree. That's a bunch of BS. It's a tower, and a tower sticking out of the ground, which is unsightly and undesirable to look at as you drive up Boss Road, as you live in our community of Camelot. It is not desirable. How it was picked at that location, I don't know. I observed the surveyors for these people many months ago at the highest part of the county fairgrounds, and now that is right close to other houses like our houses. Now it's down at this present location. I don't know why they picked it here, when on the county fairgrounds there is excellent closure on the very far corner of the fairgrounds that would be camouflaged with what they proposed and a more desirable place. I can't figure out why they would pick a spot that is objectable to, I think, many people and would serve in the same location and do the same thing in another location on the county fairgrounds on the very far corner that would be westerly and southerly compared to ours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for being here tonight. Julie Dickinson. Please state your full name, ma'am, and your physical residence.
I'm Julie Dickinson. I live at 214 Camelot Drive. I don't have any elaborate presentation, but 2 points that I would like to bring up and appreciate any clarification that you guys could offer on it. The first is that it's quite a change for us in switching gears from property that would be assigned a broad municipal application and to one that is a more focused for-profit private sector application within that same land. That, speaking as a member from Camelot, that's quite a change for us to be making in how we view the land and how it is used. We appreciate any clarification that you guys can offer us in the latitudes and what is possible with that. The second point that I wish to make is one of public safety. Within my experience in living in Camelot, there has been at least one occasion where the very flood-prone areas of Boss Road have gotten so flooded that it has hemmed us in from both sides. Our only path of egress from Camelot at that time was the back of the fairgrounds, St. Mary's Church Road. Now, this is kind of a safety issue. If the land becomes encumbered underneath a private agenda, then it may limit the City of Morganton's flexibility in planning what to do or how to act in the interest and the safety of those neighborhoods that are going to be at risk in future flooding that we may not even be able to anticipate for the behavior of the river, the behavior of the mountains, and the behavior of rains in the future. So just speaking from experience, that path of egress was very important at that moment, and I would hate to see anything limit that and limit the city's ability to plan around it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Clarence Hart.
Mr. Chairman, any points that I would want to make have been well covered.
Thank you very much, sir. Danny McGuire. Mr. McGuire, if you'll please state your full name and your physical residence address.
My name's Danny McGuire, address 105 Riverview Drive. Most of my concerns have been addressed by other people. I just want to state a couple things. Somebody came up earlier and stated that there was kind of bad timing and people were out on vacations and whatnot. I'd be one of those people. I just got back maybe 2 days ago, and I saw the signs, and I checked my mail, and I have the flyer basically stating what's taking place. So I really didn't have anything prepared because I just got back in town. The second thing I want to add on is somebody was talking about property value. My wife and I was looking for a house for about 2 years, and we finally decided to buy a house kind of across from Camelot. We actually considered Camelot. That being said, if we had a cell phone tower that was 200 feet high, with half of it with just a pole, and then the rest of it with some fake-looking tree stuff, we would have never considered Camelot at all because of just the location of that cell phone tower. So I just want to be a witness that we are people of the community. It would have absolutely impacted our decision on buying a house in Camelot, and it might have impacted our decision on buying the house off of Riverview, which is off of Lost Corner. So to me, this is a very important issue. I understand and I respect Verizon. I have Verizon myself. You need a cell phone tower. I just don't understand the location. Why do we have to drive by it every single day on the closest proximity to the road, when it could very easily go into another part of the property and be way better camouflaged? So I'd really like to hear from Verizon why they chose that spot and not the spot that all the people before me have already said would be a better place for the cell phone tower. I just don't understand the location of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Earl Searcy, or Searcy, I'm sorry. I have the last name Ure. It's hard to pronounce. I get it.
Earl Searcy, 113 Parkland Street. Susan and Jason and I have lived here since 1988. We've loved this community, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak this evening. To reiterate, property values, I think, will suffer, and it would be bad for all the houses in the area. The tower, in my opinion, just does not fit on that spot. Second, consider the economic impact of the cell tower. In my personal opinion, the tower will eliminate the opportunity for Quaker Meadows, which is for sale, and even the fairgrounds itself to develop as a neighborhood. You're certainly not going to build new homes across from a brand-new cell tower. And without construction of the new homes, our tax base suffers. For reference, nearby homes, this is just with a quick hit on GIS this afternoon, but nearby homes' tax values have a value of between $140,000 up to $1.2 million. This is a mix of neighborhoods with a lot of value. The homes closest to the proposed site for the tower range from $566,000 up to $1.2 million. In my opinion, many of these homes, as the gentleman just said, many of these homes would not have been built and with the tower looming over their rooftops. And if I'm correct, Morganton's tax base with these homes never having been built would drop by over $10 million. And last, Morganton's River District. I just kind of don't get it. There's so much energy has gone into the River District. A cell tower next to the River District may be legal if you approve the zoning variance, but does not seem consistent with what the River District but does not seem consistent with River District guidelines for new development that creates a quality and even a picturesque drive-by throughout our community. And Jesse, you brought up something about the ordinance says cannot impact historic property. I didn't get it. I'd never heard that before. But just to present a question, McDowell House is across the back property line, across, I think, St. Mary's Church Road. And I got to think those soldiers on their quest for their battle, if they saw that tower over there, it would be a big difference for them how it impact that house. I just think it changes the historic perspective of that location. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments tonight, sir. Jim Cates. And David Cumley.
I'm his interpreter. He doesn't hear very well.
Fine. We'll receive your comments. If you can please state both of your names for us for the record
I'm James David Conley,
and your residential physical address.
257 Camelot Drive. I lived there since 1973. This is my friend Jim. If y'all have questions, I'll speak to him.
Okay, as an educator, former educator,
Give you a name.
James B. Cates, 201 South King Street. I am basically opposed to any kind of tower near a school and a tower anywhere that's visible on a main road, so that thing. But I'm here basically to offer an alternative. Just over a half mile due west, there is, my land is a little less than 100 acres. It's right in there. And I would love to have that tower stuck back in the woods back in there. Now, we have met with Verizon folks before, but my son was concerned that they wanted to put it in the middle of a pasture where his cows roam around. But right beyond that, and all of this was in the 2-mile perimeter of the city of Morganton. So it's right off St. Mary's Church Road over there. So we would love to meet again and see if we could work out an alternative and make all of this go away. Okay.
Thank you very much for your comments, sir.
Yes, David Conley, 257 Camelot Drive. I want to submit these pictures of the daycare center which is right on Boss Road.
We'll receive them and we'll consider them whether or not they're evidentiary.
This is daycare on Boss Road. It's situated about 800 yards from the cell tower. And I estimated 800 yards based on all those 100 yards I used to run for Bill Green on the baseball team. So it's about 800 yards away.
May I interrupt for a second? I just want to clarify, did you take these photographs yourself?
Yes, sir.
Okay, please proceed, I'm sorry.
All right, and if you see the photographs from the yellow gate to the playground, 800 yards. And thousands of kids will go to that daycare. And why does the city want to take a chance with the health of thousands of kids? That's number one. Number two, the Council Oak is a historical district. We don't need a cell tower in Quaker Meadows. I'm going to request that the city send out a letter to all the people that live within that mile, because we didn't get a letter at Camelot Drive, 257. So please, city, send it all out again so these people can know. And I estimate there are 2,000 people that live past Boss Road. And the city can not find two people that who would say okay for the cell tower. So 99% don't want it. And Verizon, you need to do a better artwork on your tree. Number one, let's make it look like a hemlock. Make it thick and make the plastic limbs go all the way down to the ground. And lastly, my cell phone works pretty good, and please find another location.
Thank you, sir, for your comments tonight. Josh?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that was me.
Okay, all right. So at this time, there's no one else on the list, but I did not want to not allow anyone here who wanted to speak on the issue to please have that opportunity. Please come forward, ma'am, identify yourself, give your full name and your residential physical address.
She will need to be sworn.
And you will need to be sworn. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that you will tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I will.
Thank you. Please proceed with your full name and your physical residential address.
My name is Heather Ann Ives. I live at 105 Woodsway Court. I know that we're talking about the law and ordinances right now. My situation is such that I was planning to try to sell my home this spring, and I had already talked to real estate agents before at this point. We had to put the sale of our house off for a year for family reasons. I have a son who is disabled who cannot get the services that he needs in Morganton, and we need to move to Asheville. My son is at the present time in the hospital. We visited him tonight. And I will not be able to afford to move to Asheville if there's any decrease in my property value because of the cell phone tower, which means my son will not be able to get the medical services that he needs and he requires that he cannot get in Morganton. It will cause a financial burden on me and my family, and it will make it impossible for me to be able to get my son what he needs. So although we're looking strictly at the law, there are situations that are going to cause, I think, a financial burden to all the people in this room, and that does need to be considered. I also have a question. When Mr. Britton was discussing I thought I heard something about a limitation possibly on the height of any cell phone tower. What does the law say as far as how tall this cell phone tower can be or any structure can be, even in that location?
Ma'am, we're not in a position to answer your questions tonight,
Okay.
but you can please share any comments you would like.
Well, that's a concern I had, because I thought something that he read off said something about there being a limitation on, possibly on height, that it had to be within a certain height. 200 feet is very tall. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for
Thank
being
you.
here, ma'am. Is there anyone else who would like to speak tonight and be heard? Yes, sir, please come forward, state your full name and your residential physical address. We'll need to have you sworn, or you you can be affirmed as well. Do you swear, will you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you provide to this board tonight is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. My name is Ed Redmond. I live at 241 Camelot Drive. And Mr. Lindsay brought up a point of co-location of towers. And I wondered if perhaps the reason the tower has been decided to be placed next to Boss Road is that at the reading of the engineer's letter says that it's going to be a greater density of towers together with the need for the 5G and all the new things that are coming on. And I wondered if perhaps the reason for that tower being in that spot would be the future tower being in the spot where everybody else wants it.
Sir, we're not in a position to answer any questions
No, I
tonight.
understand that, but all I'm saying is that is Verizon looking for the future and trying to put towers someplace where at some other point they can come and co-locate another tower. And I'd like to have that clarified before you make a decision, because I'm sure if there are two towers there, people are really going to be upset.
Thank you very much for your comments, sir. Are there any other individuals tonight? Seeing none, I will close the public. Yes, sir, please come forward if you'll state your full name and your residential physical address. If you'll please raise your right hand. Do you agree to swear or affirm that the testimony you provide tonight is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir. My name is Dusty Georges. I live at 111 Belvedere Drive. And I just want to make a comment, and I apologize if it's not the correct format because I've never did this before, but I know we've all talked about the visual impact. Has anybody really seen that thing on 85? I mean, I'm just being honest. I almost took a picture of it the other day. It is gargantuan. I mean, it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen, and it's on the side of 85. I mean, this is what we're expecting in our community. I just want to reiterate how ridiculous it looks on 85. Just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
At this time, I'll close the public comment period, and the Board of Adjustment will enter into its deliberations. The first thing that we will do is proceed with any findings of fact that the board deems appropriate. I would say to the audience and to the members of the board that fortunately or unfortunately, this Board of Adjustment, as my comments earlier indicated, is constrained by the Morganton City Ordinance. We're not allowed to enter into policy discussions with regard to what's appropriate or not appropriate with regard to anything outside of what the ordinance already declares. We also are constrained tonight to not receive any references from any of the speakers with regard to newspaper articles or journals or any other citations that are outside of this room that didn't have the individual here to testify to. As I've stated earlier, hearsay is not allowed. The members of the board, the zoning ordinance, as you know, is set forth in the provisions of 3.4.7 paren capital H in paren, and there are suggestive requirements that the zoning ordinance makes in subsection small a in paren all the way through subsection F in paren. And then there are specific requirements for the approval of an applicant with regard to towers set forth in paren 6 in paren. I would draw your attention, firstly, members of the board, to the items that are set forth in subparagraph A through subparagraph J in paren, and ask if any members of the board have concerns that any of the issues set forth in those items factually have not been presented tonight.
Mr. Chairman, you're ahead of me because I'm not certain that we are interpreting the city ordinance correctly, and we don't have our own attorney to make that interpretation. I am not convinced that that the city council intended with their ordinance to preclude consideration of impact on a residential neighborhood with their LID when they provide it with their HID and their MID. So I would like clarification from the city attorney when we meet with city council and when we confer with the planning board to see whether or not, in fact, we're interpreting the ordinance correctly by disregarding the effect on the immediate neighborhood. So I could not vote at this point to proceed until I had clarification, with respect to that point. I think that the city council intended by implication for us to have great concern and care when it came to neighborhoods. And furthermore, I don't think that the city council intended when they passed the ordinance for us to disregard the optimal location of sites. We have seen from Mr. Cates' testimony that Verizon and presumably other cell phone locators have been looking at lots of separate properties. And so their decisions as to optimal locations may not be predicated upon their impact on neighborhoods, but upon their financial returns. We may or may not be limited by the General Assembly in terms of the questions that we can raise, but again, we don't have our own attorney to tell us how bound we are by the General Assembly in terms of the requirements that we, and for that matter, the City Council can place on it. So I'm in agreement with those tonight who said that we needed to have additional time and additional discussion to reach a conclusion. And furthermore, I would be very appreciative of hearing from Verizon's technical expert to address some of the specific questions that we have raised from a technical standpoint. I think also that if we have the power to do so, that we should request a meeting with the Planning Commission of the City of Morganton to address the issues that have been raised tonight with respect to zoning, since they initiate most zoning changes. I don't know how quickly and how easily it would be for us to have a meeting or to bring these issues to the Planning Commission, or whether or not, for that matter, any action that they might take and that was approved by the council in terms of amending the ordinance, whether or not it would be binding in any way. But absent advice to the contrary, I would recommend that we move in that direction rather than tailor a narrow decision tonight based upon the current interpretation that we're taking, that we can only ask these very small, minor, specific points. And I would raise one further point that I think we need to address. At this point, it sounds like any mitigation of adverse effects on the neighborhood, and I'm not a practicing realtor now or a real estate agent, but I was once a broker, and I've done the appraisals, and I don't know if Verizon has any way to mitigate the adverse effects on a residential neighborhood while perhaps enhancing the effects on a rezoned property if that's in prospect for the fairgrounds. But if Verizon has any way to address the issue of mitigation, before we meet again and took further testimony and had the input from the Planning Commission and from the City Council, I would like to hear what Verizon would say about how they can financially remunerate us, or whether or not mitigation is going to be the exclusive responsibility of the City of Morganton, or there's not going to be mitigation.
Ms. Lindsay, thank you for your comments. I would respond by pointing you and the members of the board specifically to the Morganton City ordinance. And again, to cite to section 3.4.7, paren H, subsection 5, to describe to you the Board of Adjustment's authority, which in fact the ordinance titles that section as such, and it reads with declaratory language, the Board of Adjustment shall consider and issue, if appropriate, permits for the construction, erection, location, and relocation of telecommunication towers in all cases where the administrator is without authority to issue the permit. We've heard testimony tonight that the administrator, the senior planner, is without authority to issue that permit, and therefore the matter comes to the Board of Adjustment as appropriate, consistent with the city zoning ordinance. So it's appropriate for us to hear it tonight as a body and to make a decision tonight. The question then becomes whether or not the application is consistent with the requirements set forth in the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance is set forth with a fair amount of specificity, and in fact, it's captioned in subsection 6 entitled Specific Requirements. The ordinance requires this body, the Board of Adjustment, to issue findings of fact based on the evidence presented and the application that the following requirements are applicable to telecommunication towers and antennas erected or constructed after April 7th, 1997, and unless specifically waived or varied by this body, the applicant and/or the owner of such tower shall be responsible for seeing that the tower remains in compliance with the requirements at all times. Subparagraph A says that antennas may be considered either principal or accessory uses. Subparagraph B talks about communication towers being constructed and shall at all times remain in compliance, and goes on to describe FAA regulations. Subparagraph C talks about the base of the tower shall be enclosed by a decay-resistant security fence or wall at least 8 feet in height unless the tower and all guide anchors are mounted entirely on a limited access building at least 8 feet in height. Anti-climbing devices shall be installed on all towers. Subparagraph D says, unless specifically required or authorized by either the FCC or the FAA or by some other federal or state authority, no illumination shall be permitted on any antenna or tower. Subparagraph E, the outside storage of personal property, materials, and equipment is prohibited, and the entire tower site shall comply with all local ordinances related to nuisances and the proper maintenance of the premises. Subparagraph F, all towers shall either maintain a galvanized steel finish or subject to any other applicable standards of the FAA, FCC, or other federal or state regulatory authority, be painted a neutral color so as to minimize any adverse visual impact. The ordinance goes on to say new towers shall comply with a minimum setback of 50 feet except where the tower is adjacent to property used for residential purposes. The setback shall equal 1 foot for each foot in tower height. Next subparagraph H, all new telecommunication towers or relocated telecommunication towers shall be structurally designed to support at least one additional user. The applicant or owner shall provide a statement that the owner is willing to permit an additional user to attach communication facilities on a commercially reasonable basis to the tower so long as the additional user does not interfere with the primary purpose of the tower. The site plan shall indicate a location for at least one additional equipment building for use by a second user. The statement and site plan shall be attached to the permit. Subparagraph I, standard screening in accordance with section 4.4.7, which was referred to earlier by the senior planner, shall be installed around the perimeter of all improvements on the tower site. That's the barbed wire issue. And lastly, any antenna or tower that is not operated for a continuous period of 12 months shall be considered abandoned and shall be removed. If such antenna or tower is not removed within 60 days of receipt of written notice from the city may remove such tower and/or antenna and place a lien upon the property for the cost of removal. Any person who is an applicant who presents a request doesn't have to explain to this board any other issue other than what's set forth in the ordinance. We are constrained by what's set forth in the ordinance. We are not allowed to consider the aesthetic nature of the item or any other issue other than what's set forth in the ordinance. And so I would ask the board if there are any issues with the items that I have read tonight that the ordinance sets forth that have not been presented adequately in the application or by testimony tonight by the applicant.
Mr. Chairman, I'd ask you to go back to page 344 and to tell me whether or not we are precluded from considering item D under 5.
So the way that the ordinance reads, as you'll notice on page 3-44, it says right there before you get to subparagraph A, in considering the application and for the purpose of establishing a factual basis for its findings, the board may require the applicant to provide evidence in support of the application, including, among other things, and of course you've cited to the technical aspects in the engineering report. It is certainly within the purview of this board to require that engineering report studies and assessments demonstrating that the location of the tower in the proposed district is necessary in the interest of public safety or is a practical necessity or technical requirement and will provide the highest optimum level of coverage. Of course, the applicant has presented an engineering report, and it's up to this board to determine, A, whether or not that engineering report is required, and secondly, if we determine that it's required, whether or not it's adequate.
Yes, read that, may want to read that again for the entire.
So for purposes, Mr. Lindsay, of this body, what we need to determine, and I would just at this point ask for members of the board to agree or disagree that the applicant has met the findings that I have described that are set forth in the ordinance. And so I'll start with you, Ms. Shelor, and ask you if the applicant has met the requisite requirements set forth in the zoning ordinance. Do you agree or disagree?
I think they have.
Ms. Shelor says that she believes they have. I would ask you, Mr. Breton, if you believe the applicant has met the factual basis in their application or either in the testimony tonight set forth in the zoning ordinance for the tower.
Well, I just got a question here on 3-44. Gentleman talking here about he never got no letter, and it states that everybody should have got a letter within that mile perimeter where the tower's going to be. And apparently these people didn't get that, so I have a question. Somebody ain't met what's put forth here.
Just so everyone's aware on the board, two things. One, the provision is, again, that the board may require So it's not requisite that a letter actually be sent.
Why is it in
If-
here
if
to that effect?
It's up to this board to determine whether or not a letter has to be sent. But I will say that you did hear direct testimony tonight from the senior planner that letters were sent consistent with the zoning ordinance.
Well, I heard a couple people say they didn't get them. I don't know.
That, may I,
Yes.
I have
What
further
you're-
evidence with respect to that, Mr. Chairman.
what you're referring to is A, under that section that Mr. Ure provided, which is copies of letters sent to owners of all existing towers within 1 mile radius of the proposed site. Now, I don't have anything in here that shows that a letter was sent to all existing towers within 1 mile of the proposed site. What I believe you're referring to are the letters that the community got, which list that we are required to send a letter to all adjacent property owners to the site, which was done at least 10 days prior.
May I interject, Mr. Chairman, because I know that's not
Hold on a
correct.
second. Hang on a second. Let's have decorum. Mr. Lindsay, I'll recognize you.
No letter was received by Historic Burke Foundation, which touches the property. I know that because I have talked with the president and with the vice president of Historic Burke Foundation, and they never received, and they manage the Charles McDowell House, and they never received a letter.
So that we're clear, board, on the issue that we're talking about, at this point in time, there's the discussion around the notification letter that's, the city is required to send out to individuals pertinent to the meeting tonight. There's evidence given by testimony tonight that letters were sent consistent with the requirements of the ordinance. So, Mr. Lindsay, I'm back to you. Do you have any concerns, Mr. Britton, with regard to any inadequacies with regard to findings of fact concerning the items set forth in the requirements of the specific requirements under the zoning ordinance?
Well, I guess I'm confused a little bit about, the historical districts over there, that what Mr. Bailey's talking about, wasn't notified. I've got an issue with that, not letting people know what's going on.
So, under the Board of Adjustment approval process, as you noticed, as I noticed earlier, under 3.4.7, paren H in paren, the issue around visual impact, technical requirements, scenic areas, historical districts, are tied directly under subparagraph 5 to MID or HID zoning districts. And as you will recall, we received testimony tonight that the zoning district is the LID zoning district, and therefore the provisions around naturally scenic areas, historic districts, would not be applicable to this applicant under the zoning ordinance.
Well, I just think that people ought to be notified of what's going on, whatever orders it's in or ain't. So I'm against it. That's just the way I am.
Mr. Lindsay, with regard to the findings of fact that have been discussed tonight, do you have any concerns about any of the issues presented under the ordinance or the testimony presented tonight?
I don't believe that the petitioner has established that engineering reports, studies, and assessments demonstrate that the location of the tower in the proposed district is necessary in the interest of public safety or is a practical necessity or a technical requirement and will provide the highest optimum level of coverage. And I believe that could be clarified with additional testimony from their technical expert and after consultation with the Planning Commission and the City Council. So I could not vote tonight for approval based on the fact that I don't believe they've met the requisite standard in regard to item D.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay, for your comments. Mr. Lowe, I ask you the same question.
I find it unfortunate that we have to reach this point on this board, but unfortunately, we don't have a lot of leeway. I think they have met the criteria for their permit. I'm not sure it's in the best place, but I don't know that we as a body have have the voice to ask that they move it. So under my understanding of our purpose, I would have to agree.
The chair recognizes that we have a divided board. We have two members who have concerns about the finding of fact and two members that believe we need to move forward tonight. At this time, I would represent my position to be that, having reviewed the application and heard the testimony tonight, that consistent with the zoning ordinance, it's my view that the applicant has met the requirements, the very limited requirements of the specific nature of the zoning ordinance, and that it is entitled to a findings of fact that it has done so. And at this point, I would call the question and ask for a formal vote by the board to approve the application of Selco for the purposes of placing a cell tower out on Boss Road. And I would ask for the formal vote. All in favor of the applicant, is there a motion to approve the applicant's desire to place a cell tower out on Boss Road at the Burke County Fairgrounds? Is there a motion to do so?
So moved.
Motion's been made. Is there a second to that motion? Motion has been seconded. Is there discussion?
I'd like for us to vote on a roll call so that it can be recorded as to who voted for what.
So the motion has been amended that there be a roll call so that each member can state his decision. Is there a second to that motion to amend?
Second.
Motion's been seconded to amend the motion. The motion, therefore, will be that each member will state his or her decision on the motion. In that event, the chair will go last. Susan Shelor, what is your decision? Approval or not approval? Member Shelor has declared that her decision is to approve. Mr. Britton?
No.
Mr. Britton has declared his decision to not approve the application tonight. Mr. Lindsay?
No.
Mr. Lindsay has voted no to disapprove the application tonight. Mr. Lowe?
Approve.
Mr. Lowe has voted to approve the decision tonight. In the opinion of the chair, the applicant has met its burden of complying with the zoning ordinance requirements, and therefore the chair votes yes for approval. This matter is concluded. I would say to the members of the audience, first and foremost, thank you for your serious attention tonight. And secondly, any party that feels aggrieved by the decision the board has made tonight has the right to appeal this body's decision to the superior courts of the state of North Carolina. I would ask for a motion to adjourn. Motion's been made to adjourn. Is there a second? Motion seconded. This meeting stands adjourned.
Thank you. You did a good job of chairing it. Sorry I couldn't go.